Hi there my crafty friends. In today's video I'm going to show you how I made this vintage recycled tin for my desk. So I'm going to use this to keep my paintbrushes in on my desk, and I'm going to make a few more to put all my other little bits and bobs inside. So I want to show you step by step how I got this textured background that looks like it's sort of rusted and worn, and then we're going to decorate it with some pretty embellishments. So to start with, we're going to obviously need a tin from the kitchen. Just wash it really well and leave it to dry overnight, and then it's ready to use. Obviously we're going to peel off the label. There is some stickiness left, but that really doesn't matter because we're going to cover it. So to start off with, we're going to use a piece of cardstock to cover it. I've just got a double-sided piece. It's actually a Kaiser Craft piece from the Kaiser Craft range. It doesn't have to be double-sided, it doesn't have to be Kaiser Craft. It just needs to be a cardstock and not a paper, because it needs to have a little bit of thickness, because we are going to wet it and rub some of the paper off to get that texture. So we're just going to measure it from the bottom of this little lip to the bottom of the can, and then just cut it, and it should just fit around and slightly overlap. And to glue it down, we're just going to use some Mod Podge. You could also use craft glue, but I prefer the Mod Podge if you do have. So let's just get a paintbrush, just make sure it's dry, and then we're just going to glue it down. Now it's going to on the end, it is going to pull up a little bit until you put the other end down to keep it flat, but that's okay. So we just put it all on. You want it not too thick because it'll take forever to dry, but you want it to adhere, so it has to have a little bit of it's got to be a little bit thick. It doesn't matter if you go over there, it's all part of the texture. So it's not drying too quick because it's quite cold here tonight. So I want to do the whole can and then stick it. But if you're in an area where your Mod Podge will dry really quickly, if it's really hot, you could just do it in sections. Sort of put some Mod Podge and then put the paper. Alright, so we're just going to push that down. Try to get it aligned as well as you can to the top. And try not to get any air bubbles underneath if you can. It is a little tricky, and it does have a sharp end inside. I'm trying not to cut myself. Now we are going to put a ribbon in the inside, like I did of this one, at the end, to be able to sort of just protect that sharp end. I'll put it on at the end of the project. You could put it on in the beginning if you don't want to hurt yourself. Mine isn't super sharp, like it's sharp, but I can put my hand on it. It's not going to slice me. So just try and push it up right into the groove there. Doesn't matter if there's a little bit of a gap, but just shift it up. It's got a bit of an air pocket. So tug it slightly just to get it there. And I'm just going to put some Mod Podge on the end here to overlap, or on the overlap. And then press that down. Look, if there's a little bit of a gap, it's not the end of the world. It's all going to get covered with ink anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So just press that down. If there's a few air bubbles, also it doesn't matter that much, because we're not going to have a really smooth finish in the end anyway. We are going to add layers to it. So now we're going to leave this to dry. It needs to dry really well, because we are going to wet it and peel paper off. So you can either leave it to dry for an hour or so, or I'm just going to use the heating tool to dry it a bit quicker, and I'll be back in a jiffy. So that's dried really, really well. And now we're going to do the next step for the background. As you can see, it's got quite a, it looks like it's been sort of tossed around in the rain for years and years. So it's quite, looks rusty and tattered. And to achieve this, we're going to do some paper peeling first. So what we're going to do is just take a spray bottle, or you can just sprinkle with your hand. And we're just going to spray some water onto this. Just leave it for a second or two to absorb. And then we're just going to start to rub, and you'll see the paper will start to come off. Some of it will peel and some will actually just like break up into little pieces. Now it's okay, I think, that it becomes thin and you actually get the ridges of the can. I quite like that. But if you don't, you could always put a second piece of cardstock perhaps to keep it flat so it doesn't make the ridges come through. So as you can see here, it's got like that peeling, and you can just peel bits. You can leave some of the sections sort of lifted as if it's the label coming off. And we're just going to work our way through this and do that on all the paper. See, look. So you see why the cardstock needs to be a little bit thicker than just regular paper. You've got to give it a bit of, you need to have an underside left. And also, it doesn't really matter what color you use. I went for quite a neutral, like a beige, only because I'm going to ink over it. But you could use a colored one if you like. This takes a little while, but it's actually quite a lot of fun, I think. When I first tried to do this, I used a baby wipe, which didn't work. You need to use your fingers. There we go. Now, it's torn a little bit, and that's perfectly fine because we're actually going to use some paste medium on top of that too. We've got quite a few layers. If you've seen my other videos, if you're not new to my channel, you know that I talk about texturing and layers a lot. It's one of my favorite things. So this too will have lots of layers. What I'll do with that, I will just pop a little drop of Mod Podge just to stick that down. And I think that's all right. So as you can see, it looks like it's been through the walls a little bit. It's got peeling paint, the ridges are shining through. That's exactly how we want it. So I'm just going to dry this quickly because it's a little bit wet from the water, and then we'll do the next step. Okay, so that's dry now. And now what I'm going to add is this Distress Grit Paste from Holtz. I've only recently bought this, and I do like the texture it leaves, and it will sort of make the tin feel like it has dirt attached to it. I'm not quite sure if you can see, but it gives it like a bit of a rough finish, which I quite like. So I'm just going to use my palette knife. As you can see, it's quite thick and it's grainy. You could also use gesso, but it won't have the same effect. But you could still use the gesso to make layers, or you could just leave the step out. So I'm just going to use my little palette knife, and I'm just going to put it just in certain areas. I'm not going to make it too thick. I'm just going to put it just here and there, just to give it some additional features. As you can see, if it goes over the ridgy part, it leaves it on the ridges, which I actually like. So I can leave a few thicker areas. Don't forget to also go like near the bottom and near the top. We tend to sometimes just work in the middle. I like that. If you have any tears in your paper, like where it got a little bit too wet and you can still see the tin through, like I had, I just covered it. Although I put some Mod Podge to glue it earlier, but I just cover it with a little bit of this, and it just will seal it off. Or you could leave the tin exposed. That also doesn't really matter. It would theoretically, over time, the tin would lose the label, so some of the tin showing is also fine. I suppose it depends how vintage and old you want to make it look. You can leave a few chunky bits. I like that too. I think that's plenty. All right, now we're going to just dry this again, and then we're going to ink it and stain it. Now we're going to ink it to make it look rusty and old. So I'm using my Tim Holtz Oxide inks. I have Vintage Photo in the pad and brushed Corduroy in the spray. Now when we do this, because the grit paste is quite coarse, it will damage your sponge on your applicator. So if you have a spare one, then you can use it. I do have a spare one to use, so I don't mind this one wrecks, but just be mindful that with the rubbing it will sort of tear it up a little bit. So I'm going to start with the Vintage Photo. Let's put in quite a bit on, and then we're just going to rub over it, just darken some areas, lighten others, and then depending if we've got paper or grit paste or if it's peeled, it'll be darker or lighter. So you don't have to really make this effect. As you're rubbing, it tends to make its effect of light and dark, just depending on what the underneath texture is. That strange noise that you might be hearing in the background is my dog outside. She's playing with her toy. It's actually almost 11:30 at night and she's playing games. She's a little bit crazy. I'll just apply a little bit more. Now if you don't have inks, you could also use acrylic paints for this. You would just need to make them a little bit more watered down, and then maybe make multiple layers to get this kind of effect. Maybe I'll give this a go afterwards with make a new tin using acrylic paints. You can already see the difference. And then there where it's peeling, it sort of makes it a little darker. And now what I'm going to do is, I've got the Oxide spray. I'm not going to spray on it. I'm just going to put a few drops onto the sponge. Just like this. That. So the darker area has popped through there, and then the ridges are showing over there. I just love the texture. Add a little bit more. What I might do is I might just add the ink onto the tin. So the grit paste sort of resists the ink a little bit, so it stays lighter, but the paper underneath absorbs it. And there we go. So that is actually done. The base is done, as you can see. I think it looks like an old rusty can. So one last time of drying. For this one I'm also going to use flowers, but instead of the turquoise and white or beige, I'm going to use a pink. First we're going to add this little name tag that I have on this one. Now as you can see, it's a bit bendy. I've made it rounded so it fits onto the tin, and then I've attached it with two of these brads that I had. They're not matching 100%, they're a bit more silvery, but it doesn't really matter. So first we're going to find the position of where we want to have this. On my first one I put it near the top. I think this one I might do maybe nearer the bottom, and then just add my flowers up that way. Anyway, so how we start is, they're pretty easy to bend. We're just going to find the position and then bend it as much as we can. And then what I find is, obviously the areas that need to go to attach it are still sticking up, so I just used a pliers to sort of bend them down a little bit, very gently, because it could snap. It's only thin metal. Just sort of bend it until it's, I'm going to just bend the whole thing. Sort of have to give it just little gentle tugs. You can see it's starting to fit. That side's alright, we have to just bend it a little bit more on that side. And I think that should work fine. You can see the sides where the brads will go in are pretty close, if not touching the can. So we can, I think that's enough bending. So I'm just going to look at all the areas and just find sort of which side of the can I want to be the front, because there's always sometimes an area that you prefer. I do think I like this one that's got the darker area there. Or maybe that. I think we'll go with that. So now to attach this to the can, I'm going to use my piercing tool. Do be careful you don't poke yourself in through the can. You've got to be quite, position your hands correctly and try not to injure yourself, please. So we're just going to put it possibly over there, and then we'll just work the flowers around that. So once you've got the position, you just hold it down with your one hand. Inside, make sure your finger is away from this area, and just with the piercing tool, we're going to just gently press in, just sort of back and forth. It goes through pretty easily, but you have to give it some force. Actually, the first one went in a lot easier. There we go. Okay, that makes the hole. And then you pop the little brad through, and then you just open it on the inside. Actually, the other one was a little bit easier because I had it nearer the top, but that's okay. We can get this to it. And then you just press them open. Let me just see if you can actually see that. I'm not sure if it's very clear. It's just inside, and you just press it open. That's the one there. So now for the other one, we'll do the same. Just make sure it's straight. Actually, if it's a little bit lopsided, that's fine too. Position your fingers and press. And then the little brad goes in, and then you open it on the inside. Come on. There we go. And that should hold it into place. You don't actually need glue or anything. And there's your little label. You don't have to put a metal element on if you don't have one, or if you don't want one. You could also use a sticker. You could use a little wooden frame. You could use anything really. I just really liked the look of this, and I had some in my supplies. So now we're going to add some flowers. This is also totally up to you how you want to design it. I'm just going to, like I said, I'm going to use pink and white. I do have some paper flowers. I also have some stickers. I'll probably use a combination of, I have these like 3D stickers, which I might also use. And then one other thing I do have is these acrylic leaves that I had bought such a long time ago. I don't even remember how many years ago I bought these. I don't remember from where. And so I might use, I'll just take a white one and a pink one out and just see if I could use those. And then I also have a paper leaf, which can actually be like shaped. It's got a wire inside. And now we're just going to play and just see the placement of the flowers. It's a bit tricky because it's rounded. Everything doesn't always stay while you're trying to work it out, but we'll get there. And then I also want to stick this little number on. I'll put one on this one. This is actually from a vintage bingo game. It's the little numbers that go on top of the board, or that get selected from the from the hat, I don't know, from the bucket that they were in, and put onto the board. So they're authentic vintage, and I really, really like them. I use them in quite a bit of my projects. So I'm going to put that somewhere too, near the end, once I've placed all my flowers. So I'm just thinking this one might be a little bit too big. It doesn't feel right. Maybe I'll go more with, I've got a carnation, they're not my, oh, that would work. Just going to cut these out. They're a little bit easier to position if they're not all in one piece. Oh, that could work. And another white one. Sometimes you make, you place your flowers and it just works straight away the first time. Other times, as you know, you can sit for hours and hours and not get it to work. What I might do, I'm just going to go look through all my other flowers and just see what else I have. And there we go, it's done. I'm quite happy with that, and it can hold my paintbrushes or my pens on my desk, and it matches my little turquoise and white one, and I think we'll need a third. and I'm just going to think what color is probably purple for that one. I'd like to thank you very much for watching my video. I do hope you got some inspiration or learned something new and you'd like to try something for yourself. Please do subscribe to my channel. I am planning to make a lot more videos with off-the-page kind of projects like this. I have a lot of ideas in my head that I want to make, and I will video all of that. So please do subscribe, and thanks again for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye. What I nearly forgot to do was the inside. You don't have to put a ribbon on the inside if your can is not sharp. Mine is a little sharp, and I just want to show you how I put that in. So I've just got a piece of ribbon that I'm going to just hot glue in there. So I'm just going to quickly measure how much I need, just roughly. Doesn't have to be exact. So it'll be too long anyway. And then what I do is I'll use the hot glue gun, and I'll go on the inside first and then on the top and try and make it as neat as possible. It's a bit of precision work, but we have to do it. So the glue will probably dry very quickly because you're going onto a cold tin, so you're going to have to work quite fast. I'm just going to position it. I should have done it the other way. Sorry, because I'm right-handed. It'll be easier the other way. So let's just start again. Sorry about that. So I'm going to go towards the right. So you put a little bit of glue just under the rim, and you stick your ribbon down. Try not to burn yourself. My finger is touching the hot glue. I'm quite used to this because I work a lot with the hot glue gun. But if you don't, please don't burn yourself. And then we're going to glue and go and glue and go. And now we'll do the top. I'm just going to use a tool to be able to press it down, because this one has to go into the glue and I really don't want to burn myself anymore. So we're just going to put it in the groove like this and then press it down like that into the glue. If it seeps over, it's fine, we can trim it later. So again, do this in sections because it's going to dry very quickly.